Please, save my wife first.
Okay, I will. Stay with her.
Thank you. Please hurry.
I will.
The sky was bleeding gold when Pamela Simons saw the smoke. She'd been driving for 3 hours straight, coming off a double shift that had left her hands trembling and her mind foggy with the kind of exhaustion that makes you question every choice you've ever made. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of regret, and all she wanted was to get home, collapse into bed, and forget that she'd ever heard the words Code Blue. But then she saw it, the dark plume rising above the guardrail, the shattered glass catching the dying light like scattered diamonds, the grotesque shape of a luxury sedan resting on its roof like a dying animal. Her foot moved to the brake before her brain could argue. "Keep driving," a voice whispered. "You're off the clock. Someone else will stop. You've given enough." But her car was already pulling onto the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires, and Pamela was reaching for her phone with fingers that knew the rhythm of 911 by heart. The scene hit her in waves as she approached, the acrid smell of burning rubber and engine oil, the eerie silence broken only by the hiss of a ruptured radiator, the glitter of safety glass forming a deadly carpet across the asphalt. The vehicle was expensive, European, the kind of car that cost more than Pamela made in 2 years. Its undercarriage was exposed like a wound, wheels still slowly spinning in the air. "Hello?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Can anyone hear me?" A groan answered her, low, wet, painful. Pamela dropped to her knees beside the wreckage, peering into the crushed cabin. Her nurse's eyes cataloged the damage with clinical precision, deployed airbags, a spiderweb of cracks across the windshield, dark stains spreading across the cream leather interior. 2 bodies, still strapped into their seats, hanging upside down like tragic marionettes. The man was conscious barely, silver-haired, maybe 65, with blood running from a gash above his temple down into his distinguished eyebrows. His eyes found hers, desperate and pleading. "Please." His voice was a rasp, each word clearly costing him. "My wife, save her first." Pamela's gaze shifted to the woman beside him. Older, unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. No visible major bleeding, but that meant nothing. Internal injuries could be catastrophic, silent killers waiting to strike. The man's hand reached toward his wife's limp fingers, trembling with the effort. "She's all I have. Please, Velma first. Promise me." Something cracked open inside Pamela's chest, not the armor she'd built during 12 years of emergency room triage, not the professional distance that had kept her sane through countless tragedies, but something deeper, something she'd thought was already dead. She looked into this stranger's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in months. Not a patient number, not a liability, not a statistic in an overcrowded hospital system. She saw a man who loved his wife more than his own life. "I'm a nurse," Pamela heard herself say, already reaching for the door mechanism with trembling hands. "I've got you both. Stay with me." The man's eyes closed briefly, something like relief washing over his blood-streaked face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Pamela didn't know it then, but in that moment, kneeling on broken glass in her civilian clothes, with sirens still distant and the autumn sun setting behind the mountains, she'd just made a choice that would cost her everything she'd built and give her back everything she'd lost. The stranger's plea would echo in her mind for weeks to come, but it would be his gratitude, that simple, profound thank you, that would sustain her through the nightmare ahead. Behind her, the first emergency vehicles crested the hill, lights painting the scene in urgent reds and blues. Pamela took a breath, pushed aside her exhaustion, and became what she'd almost forgotten how to be. She became someone who saved lives not because it was her job, but because it was her calling. 3 weeks later, Pamela would sit in a hospital cafeteria in civilian clothes, watching Velma Gross from across the room, wondering why she couldn't seem to walk away. 3 weeks later, she would learn that mercy has a price, and that sometimes the people you save are the ones who end up saving you. Pamela's badge beeped as she swiped into the ICU, the familiar sound that had once meant purpose now just another hollow note in the symphony of her burnout. 48 hours had passed since the crash on Highway 9, 48 hours since she'd knelt in broken glass and made a promise to a dying man. She'd given her statement to the paramedics, watched them load Lance and Velma Gross into separate ambulances, and driven home with blood on her jeans and glass in her hair. She should have let it go. That's what 12 years in emergency medicine had taught her: you do your part, You hand off to the next link in the chain. You go home. You don't follow up. You don't get attached. You survive by not caring too much, because if you care about everyone, you'll have nothing left for yourself. But when Pamela pulled up the ICU census on her tablet that morning, her fingers moved with a will of their own, scrolling past her assigned patients to the names she had no business looking for. Gross Lance, room 407. Critical but stable. Gross Velma, room 412. Induced coma, traumatic brain injury, prognosis uncertain. Pamela's chest tightened. She told herself it was just professional curiosity, that any nurse would want to know the outcome of a roadside rescue. But professional curiosity didn't explain why she dreamed about Velma's shallow breathing for 2 nights straight, or why Lance's desperate whisper, "Save her first," kept echoing in her mind during her morning shower. "Simons, you've got bed 6. Charge nurse Patricia called out, her voice cutting through the morning huddle. 72-year-old post-op cardiac. Needs close monitoring. Pamela nodded, pulling her focus back to the work that actually paid her bills. The shift swallowed her whole the way it always did: vital signs and medication passes, anxious family members and doctors who barely looked up from their tablets when they gave orders. She was good at her job, efficient and thorough, but somewhere along the way the satisfaction had leaked out of it, leaving only the mechanics behind. During her lunch break, she found herself on the 4th floor. Room 407's door was closed, but through the observation window, she could see Lance Gross propped up in bed, oxygen cannula in his nose, monitors beeping their steady rhythm. He looked smaller than he had in the crash, diminished by the hospital gown and the 4 lines tethering him to life. His eyes were closed, his face slack with medication or exhaustion or both. Pamela's hand was on the door handle before she could stop herself. "What are you doing?" The rational part of her brain demanded. "He's not your patient. You have no reason to be here." But she pushed the door open anyway, stepping into the room with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. Lance's eyes opened at the sound, unfocused at first, then sharpening as he recognized her face. "You," he whispered, his voice rough. "The angel on the highway." Pamela felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Just a nurse. How are you feeling, Mr. Gross?" "Like I got hit by a truck." A weak smile. "But alive. They told me you stayed until the ambulances came. That you kept pressure on my head wound." His hand moved to the bandage above his temple. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "It's enough," Pamela said softly. She glanced at his chart mounted on the wall, her trained eye picking out the details. Concussion, 3 fractured ribs, lacerated spleen being monitored conservatively. He'd been lucky. "Your wife. Room 412. The light in his eyes dimmed. "They won't let me see her. Say I'm not stable enough to be moved, and they swallowed hard. They're keeping her under. Something about brain swelling. The doctor uses words I don't understand, and I can't think straight enough to ask the right questions." Pamela knew she should offer platitudes, should maintain professional distance, should walk away. Instead, she pulled up a chair and sat down beside his bed. "What do you want to know?" For the next 20 minutes, she translated the medical jargon into plain English, explaining what an induced coma meant, why it was sometimes necessary, what the doctors would be watching for. She watched the tension in Lance's shoulders ease slightly as understanding replaced helpless confusion. "You've been married a long time?" she found herself asking. 42 years next month." His eyes grew distant, soft. "Met her at a library. I was a law student pretending to study, and she was a librarian who saw right through me. Told me if I was going to waste her shelf space, the least I could do was reshelf the books properly." He laughed, then winced at the pain in his ribs. "I kept coming back, kept misshelving books just to talk to her. Took me 3 months to work up the courage to ask her to dinner." Pamela smiled despite herself. There was something achingly genuine about the way he spoke, a devotion that 42 years hadn't diminished. It reminded her of why she'd become a nurse in the first place, not for the science, but for these moments of human connection, the privilege of witnessing people at their most vulnerable and most real. "She's going to pull through," Pamela said, though she had no business making such promises. "The fact that they're being cautious is good. It means they're not rushing, they're doing it right." Lance's hand reached out, surprisingly strong as it gripped hers. "When you found us, I thought we were done. I thought I'd failed her, that my last act would be dying in that car before help came. But you stopped. You could have driven past, but you stopped." Pamela's throat tightened. "Anyone would have." "No," Lance interrupted gently. Not anyone. You'd be surprised how many people don't want to get involved, don't want the liability, the inconvenience. But you stopped, and you stayed, and you promised me you'd take care of her first. His eyes searched hers. Did you? When the paramedics came, did you make sure? She went in the first ambulance, Pamela confirmed. With the trauma team on standby. You went in the second, but you were stable. I made sure they knew she was priority. Lance's eyes closed, tears leaking from the corners. Thank you. God, thank you. Pamela stayed until his breathing evened out into sleep, then slipped out of the room feeling more unsettled than when she'd entered. She checked her watch. Her break had run 15 minutes over. Patricia would have noticed, would make some pointed comment about time management, but Pamela couldn't bring herself to care. The rest of her shift passed in a blur, but as the evening wore on, she found her feet carrying her past room 412. The door was open this time, and through it she could see Velma grow small, and still beneath the white sheets, ventilator breathing for her, monitors tracking every heartbeat. A nurse Pamela didn't recognize was checking her 4 lines, adjusting the drip rate on the sedation. Pamela stood in the doorway, watching. Velma's face was peaceful, free of the pain and fear that must have filled her final conscious moments before the crash. Her gray hair had been neatly combed by some caring nurse, her hands folded on top of the blanket. She looked like someone's grandmother, someone's beloved wife, someone's whole world. Save her first. Pamela's phone buzzed a text from her roommate asking when she'd be home. She should leave, should clock out, should go back to her own life and let the system do what it was designed to do. These people had doctors, specialists, a whole team of professionals dedicated to their care. They didn't need one burned-out nurse who'd happened to stop at an accident scene. But as Pamela turned to leave, a hand touched her arm. She looked up to find Dr. Sarah Chun, one of the neurology attendings, studying her with curious eyes. "You're the one who found them," Dr. Chun said. It wasn't a question. The nurse from the highway. "I heard the EMTs talking." Pamela nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I was just driving by." "Right place, right time." Dr. Chun glanced at Velma's still form. "Her husband's been asking about you. Keeps telling anyone who'll listen about the nurse who saved his wife's life." She paused, measuring her next words. "He doesn't have any other family here yet. His son is flying in from New York, but that's another day or two. If you wanted to check in on them, off the record I think it might help. Sometimes patients respond to familiar voices, even in a coma. It was permission, or maybe invitation, or maybe warning." Pamela couldn't quite tell which. "I'm not their nurse," she said carefully. "I'm not even on this floor." Dr. Chin's smile was knowing. "No, you're not. But you're the one he trusts. Sometimes that matters more than credentials." She walked away, leaving Pamela standing in the doorway, staring at a woman she'd met for all of 30 minutes in the worst moment of both their lives. The rational choice was clear: go home, let go, move on. That's what professional boundaries were for, what 12 years of experience had taught her. But Pamela had stopped listening to rational choices the moment she pulled over on Highway 9. She stepped into room 412, pulled up a chair beside Velma's bed, and began to talk. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on Pamela's day off. She'd been dreaming about the crash again, the smoke, the blood, Lance's desperate eyes when her phone lit up the darkness of her bedroom. An unknown number, but something made her answer anyway. "Miss Simons?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "This is Nurse Rodriguez from ICU. Dr. Chin suggested I call you. It's about Velma Gross." Pamela was already sitting up, heart hammering. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. She's awake." The words took a moment to land. 5 days. Velma had been under for 5 days while Pamela had spent every spare moment sitting beside her bed, talking about nothing and everything: her own childhood in Atlanta, the weather, stories she'd heard from other patients over the years. The doctors had said familiar voices could help, could provide a tether back to consciousness, but Pamela had never really believed Velma could hear her. That's wonderful," Pamela managed. "Her husband must be. That's why I'm calling." Rodriguez's voice dropped lower. "She's awake, but she's confused, disoriented. She keeps asking for someone named Pam. We thought maybe could you come in?" Pamela was already reaching for her jeans. "I'm on my way." The hospital was different at 4 in the morning, quieter, dimmer, populated by the skeleton crew of night shift workers moving through halls like ghosts. Pamela's badge got her through security, muscle memory carried her to the 4th floor, but her hands were shaking as she approached room 412. Through the window, she could see Velma sitting partially upright, the ventilator tube finally gone, replaced by a simple oxygen cannula. Lance was in a wheelchair beside her bed, his own discharge delayed so he could be present for this moment. But Velma's face was tight with confusion, her hands plucking at the blanket in agitation. Rodriguez met Pamela at the door. "She's been asking for you for the last hour. Won't calm down. The problem is she hesitated. She doesn't remember her husband, doesn't remember her own name. The only thing she's certain about is that someone named Pam was supposed to take care of her." The words hit Pamela like a physical blow. She looked at Lance, saw the devastation written across his face. The woman he'd loved for 42 years didn't know who he was, but she remembered the stranger who'd found them on the highway. "I should go," Pamela whispered. "This isn't right. She needs to bond with her husband, not." "Please." Lance's voice cracked. "I don't care about my pride. I just need her calm. I need her safe. If you can do that," he swallowed hard. "Then I'm grateful, not jealous." Pamela stepped into the room, and Velma's agitated movements stilled instantly. Her eyes gray-blue, sharp despite the confusion, locked onto Pamela's face with desperate recognition. "Pam," she breathed. "You came. You said you'd take care of me first." The words were an echo of Lance's plea, filtered through damaged memory into something both accurate and heartbreaking. Pamela moved to the bedside, taking Velma's reaching hand in hers. "I'm here," she said softly. "You're safe now, Velma. You're in the hospital. You were in a car accident, but you're going to be okay." "Car accident," Velma repeated slowly, testing the words. Her free hand moved to her head, fingers finding the bandages there. I can't remember." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why can't I remember?" Dr. Chin appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, taking in the scene with clinical assessment. She gestured for Pamela to step aside for a moment, spoke quietly near the door. "Retrograde amnesia, likely temporary," she explained. "The brain injury caused swelling in areas associated with long-term memory formation. Her mind is essentially rebooting, but it's grabbing onto the most recent strong memories first, which would be you, the accident, the immediate aftermath. Older memories, her life before the crash, those are buried deeper. They'll likely come back, but we can't predict when. So she might not remember her husband for days, weeks, maybe longer." Dr. Chin's expression was grave. "In the meantime, you seem to be her anchor point. The one thing she's certain about. I know this is asking a lot, but if you could stay for a while, help keep her calm while we run some tests." Pamela glanced at her watch. Her shift didn't start until 3 p.m. She had time. Of course. What she didn't plan for was how completely Velma would depend on her presence. Every time Pamela moved toward the door, Velma's heart rate would spike on the monitors. Her breathing would quicken, panic rising in her eyes. The nurses tried to reassure her. Lance tried to soothe her with gentle words, but nothing worked except Pamela's voice, Pamela's hand in hers. By noon, Pamela had called in to request a personal day. By 4 p.m., she'd canceled her dinner plans. By 8 p.m., she was curled in the visitor's chair beside Velma's bed, having spent 16 hours in a hospital on what was supposed to be her day off. "Tell me again," Velma said softly. She'd asked the same question a dozen times, her damaged memory unable to hold onto the details. About the accident. Pamela repeated the story, keeping her voice steady and calm. The highway, the smoke, finding them in the wreckage. She left out the worst parts: the blood, the certainty that they might not survive, her own fear. Instead, she focused on Lance's love, his desperate plea to save his wife first. "He said that?" Velma's eyes drifted to where Lance slept in his wheelchair, exhausted from his own recovery. "He told you to save me first?" "He loves you very much," Pamela said. "Even if you don't remember him yet, that's real. That's true." Velma studied Lance's sleeping face, and something flickered in her expression, not recognition exactly, but a softness, a sense of rightness. "He feels familiar. Like a song I've forgotten the words to but still know the melody." It was the most hopeful thing she'd said all day. Over the next week, Pamela's life narrowed to 2 points: her assigned shifts in room 412. She'd work her regular hours, then clock out, and immediately return to Velma's side. She brought books and read aloud, played music on her phone, talked about everything and nothing. Slowly, fragments of Velma's memory began to surface: her love of gardening, her career as a librarian, the taste of her mother's apple pie. But still, she didn't remember Lance. Not fully. She'd grown comfortable with his presence, would hold his hand and listen to his stories about their life together. But there was a distance there, a gap that Lance tried to hide, but Pamela could see eating him alive. "I'm losing her," he confessed one evening when Velma was sleeping. They stood outside her room, watching through the window. "Or maybe I've already lost her. Maybe the woman I married is just gone." "Memory is an identity," Pamela said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "The core of who she is, that's still there. The rest will come back. And if it doesn't?" Pamela didn't have an answer for that. It was Patricia who finally cornered her in the break room on day 9. "Simons, we need to talk." Pamela looked up from her cold coffee, already knowing what was coming. "You've been spending time on the 4th floor. Off the clock." Patricia's expression was stern but not unkind. "With patients who aren't under your care. Administration is starting to notice. Starting to ask questions. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're getting involved. Crossing boundaries. And I get it, I really do. But this is how nurses burn out. This is how we lose good people." Patricia sat down across from her. "You need to let this go. Let the system work. Those people have doctors, therapists, a whole team. They don't need you sacrificing yourself." But they did need her. Velma needed her. Or at least, that's what Pamela told herself as she ignored Patricia's advice and returned to room 412 that evening. She found Velma agitated again, a new doctor having run tests that afternoon, poking and prodding at memories that wouldn't come. Lance sat helplessly by, unable to comfort his own wife. "Pam," Velma gasped when she saw her. "Where were you? I thought you'd left me." "Never," Pamela promised, taking her hand. "I'm right here." She stayed until midnight, until Velma finally settled into sleep. She stayed past the point of exhaustion, past the point of professional wisdom, past the point where she could pretend this was just about being a good nurse. Lance walked her to the elevator, his gait still unsteady but improving. "You're risking something for us," he said quietly. "I can see it. The way the other nurses look at you. The way you're always here even when you shouldn't be." Pamela didn't deny it. "Why?" he asked simply. She thought about the question, about all the complicated answers she could give. But in the end, it came down to something simple. "Because you asked me to save her first," Pamela said. "And I'm not done yet." Marcus Gross arrived on a Tuesday morning with the kind of presence that made hospital staff straighten their spines and check their badge positions. 6'2", impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Pamela made in a month, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed Manhattan corporate law. He had his father's sharp features, but none of the warmth, his mother's gray-blue eyes but colder, calculating. Pamela was in room 412 when he walked in, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, because she'd come straight from home on another personal day that her supervisor had reluctantly approved. She was reading to Velma from a paperback mystery novel, their hands loosely intertwined, when the door opened without a knock. "What the hell is this?" Pamela looked up, startled. The man in the doorway was staring at her with an expression that made her stomach drop, not confusion, not curiosity, but immediate suspicion hardening into hostility. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" she asked, starting to stand. "You can start by explaining why you're in my mother's room," holding her hand like you have any right to be here. His voice was sharp, attorney-trained, designed to cut. He turned to Lance, who was dozing in the wheelchair by the window. Dad, wake up. Who is this woman?" Lance stirred, blinking in confusion before his eyes focused on his son. "Marcus? When did you?" "I landed an hour ago. Came straight here." Marcus's attention snapped back to Pamela, who was now standing, acutely aware of how she must look rumpled, tired, clearly not in any kind of uniform. "I asked you a question. Who are you and why are you touching my mother?" "Marcus, this is Pamela," Lance said quickly, struggling to sit up straighter. "She's the nurse who found us on the highway. She's been helping herself, more like." Marcus moved into the room with predatory purpose, positioning himself between Pamela and Velma. "Let me guess. You happened to be there when 2 elderly people in an expensive car had an accident. You played the hero, got your foot in the door, and now you're hoping for a reward? A spot in the will?" The words landed like slaps. Pamela felt heat flood her face, a mixture of anger and humiliation. I'm a registered nurse. I work in this hospital. I was driving home when I saw the accident. So you're not on duty right now." Marcus's eyes swept over her civilian clothes, her worn sneakers. You're not assigned to this patient. Yet here you are, on your day off, holding my mother's hand. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. What's your full name? I want to verify your credentials. I want to know exactly who you are and what you think you're doing. Marcus, stop this. Lance's voice was stronger now, colored with frustration. She saved our lives. She's been sitting with your mother every day since. Every day? Marcus's head snapped toward his father. She's been here every day? Dad, do you not see what's happening? This is textbook elder exploitation. She finds vulnerable victims, establishes herself as indispensable, isolates them from family. I haven't isolated anyone, Pamela interrupted, struggling to keep her voice level. Your father has been here the entire time. The medical staff has been in and out constantly. I've just been your mother has been having trouble with her memory, and for some reason, she finds my presence calming. How convenient. Marcus turned to Velma, who was watching the confrontation with wide, frightened eyes. Mom, do you know this woman? Do you know who she is? That's Pam, Velma said softly, her hand reaching toward Pamela. She takes care of me. She promised. Marcus's expression darkened. And do you know who I am? Velma's face crumpled with confusion and guilt. You look like I'm sorry, I can't. She doesn't recognize her own son, but she knows you. Marcus wheeled on Pamela. What did you do? What did you say to her to make her? I didn't do anything. Pamela's composure finally cracked. Your mother has retrograde amnesia from the brain injury. Her recent memories are intact, but older memories are buried. It's not manipulation, it's neurology. Talk to Dr. Chun if you don't believe me. Oh, I'll be talking to a lot of people. Marcus pulled a business card from his wallet, thrust it at her. Marcus Gross, senior partner, Whitfield and Associates. I specialize in medical malpractice and elder abuse cases. So believe me when I say I know exactly what to look for, and I'm looking. Pamela took the card with trembling fingers, saw the Fifth Avenue address, the list of credentials. This wasn't some concerned son making idle threats. This was a man with the resources and expertise to destroy her career if he decided she was a threat. Marcus, please. Lance had wheeled himself closer. You're scaring your mother. You're scaring Pamela. Just sit down. Let me explain what's been happening. What's been happening is you've been recovering from a serious accident, probably on heavy pain medication, and this woman has been taking advantage of your vulnerability. Marcus pulled out his phone again. I'm calling hospital administration. I want to know what their policy is on staff forming inappropriate relationships with patients and their families. She's not staff assigned to us, Lance protested. She's been coming on her own time, as a kindness. Nothing is free, Dad. Especially not from strangers. Marcus was already dialing. I've seen this before. Someone plays the angel of mercy, makes themselves indispensable, and then suddenly there's a new will, or money going missing, or... Mr. Gross. Dr. Chin appeared in the doorway, her voice cutting through Marcus's tirade with surgical precision. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, your mother's neurologist. I need you to step into the hallway with me right now. Marcus hesitated, clearly not used to being ordered around, but something in Dr. Chin's expression brooked no argument. He followed her out, leaving Pamela alone with Lance and Velma. The silence was suffocating. I should go, Pamela said quietly. He's not wrong about the boundaries. I shouldn't be here. Don't you dare. Lance's voice was fierce. My son is being an ass, but he's not right. You've been a blessing, not a curse. Pam, don't leave. Velma's voice was small, frightened. Please don't leave me. Through the window, Pamela could see Marcus and Dr. Chun in heated conversation, his gestures sharp and aggressive, her posture calm but firm. Whatever Dr. Chun was telling him, he clearly didn't like it. Pamela's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Admin wants to see you. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. This is serious, Simons. Her hands were shaking as she read it. Marcus must have made good on his threat, must have called someone important enough to trigger an immediate response. She thought about her career, her reputation, the 12 years she'd spent building credibility in this hospital. All of it potentially destroyed because she'd stopped to help two strangers on a highway. The door opened again. Marcus stood there, his expression somehow even more hostile than before. Dr. Chun explained the medical situation. He said coldly, Fine. I accept that my mother has memory issues. But that doesn't explain why you're here every day, off the clock, inserting yourself into our family crisis. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. I don't know what your angle is, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to look into every aspect of your employment here, every patient you've ever treated, every complaint that's ever been filed. And when I find something, and I will find something, I'm going to make sure you never work as a nurse again. Marcus. Lance's voice cracked like a whip. That's enough. Apologize to her right now. Apologize? Marcus laughed bitterly. Dad, I'm trying to protect you. Both of you. From someone who is clearly someone who sat with your mother for hours while you were in New York closing deals, Lance said, his voice breaking. Someone who held her hand through panic attacks while you were too busy to answer my calls. Someone who cared when our own son couldn't be bothered to. I'm here now, aren't I? Marcus shot back. And now that I am, this inappropriate relationship ends. Today. He turned to Pamela, his expression carved from ice. Leave. Now. And don't come back. If I see you anywhere near my parents again, I'll have security remove you and file a restraining order. Do you understand? Pamela looked at Velma, saw tears streaming down the older woman's face. Looked at Lance, saw helpless fury and apology in his eyes. She thought about fighting, about defending herself, about standing her ground. But she was suddenly, crushingly tired. I understand, she whispered. She walked out of room 412 without looking back, even as Velma called her name. Even as Lance cursed his son with words Pamela had never heard him use. She made it to the elevator, made it to the parking garage, made it to her car before the tears came. She tried to save them. Instead, she might have destroyed herself. The hospital's administrative conference room was designed to be intimidating floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a long mahogany table that reflected the fluorescent lights like a dark mirror, leather chairs that creaked with authority. Pamela sat at one end in her cleanest scrubs, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling, while 3 members of the hospital's ethics board sat across from her like judges at a tribunal. To her right sat Patricia, present as her supervisor and ostensibly her advocate, though the tight set of her jaw suggested she was more disappointed than supportive. To her left was a representative from the hospital's legal department, a thin man named Howard Chun who'd introduced himself with all the warmth of a tax audit. And at the far end of the table, looking like he owned the room and everyone in it, sat Marcus Gross. Let's begin, said Dr. Richard Morrison, chief of staff, his voice heavy with the weariness of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Miss Simons, you're here today to address concerns about your conduct regarding patients Lance and Velma Gross. Specifically, allegations that you violated professional boundaries by developing an inappropriate relationship with patients and their family members outside your assigned duties. Pamela's throat was dry. She'd rehearsed what she'd say 100 times, but now the words felt flimsy, inadequate. I understand the concerns, but I want to be clear that I never what? Marcus interrupted, leaning forward. Never spent hours alone with my incapacitated mother? Never inserted yourself into our family's crisis? Never took advantage of my father's vulnerable emotional state and my mother's memory loss? Mr. Gross, Dr. Morrison said firmly, you'll have an opportunity to speak. Please let Ms. Simons finish. Marcus sat back, but his eyes never left Pamela's face, cold and predatory. Pamela took a breath, trying to steady herself. I stopped at the accident scene because I'm a nurse. That's what we do. I stayed with your parents until paramedics arrived, which is standard procedure for anyone with medical training. I had no intention of continuing contact with them after that. And yet you did, interjected Diane Walsh, the director of nursing. She pushed a printed document across the table, a log of every time Pamela had swiped her badge to access the 4th floor over the past 2 weeks. 14 visits outside your regular shifts. Multiple personal days requested. According to staff reports, you were observed in room 412 in civilian clothing, holding Mrs. Gross's hand, reading to her, acting in a capacity that goes far beyond professional courtesy. Mrs. Gross was experiencing severe anxiety related to her amnesia, Pamela explained, hearing the desperation creeping into her voice. Dr. Chin suggested that familiar voices might help her recovery. Dr. Chin suggested you might visit, Walsh corrected. She didn't suggest you move in. She didn't suggest you become the patient's primary emotional support to the exclusion of actual family members. That's not what happened. Mrs. Gross's amnesia made her unable to recognize her family. I was the only person she remembered from the immediate post-accident period. Her doctors thought my presence might provide stability while her long-term memories returned. Marcus made a sound of contempt. Convenient diagnosis. My mother, a woman with significant assets and no memory of her own life, just happens to latch onto the one person who saved her. Tell me, Miss Simons, did you discuss their financial situation with my parents? Ask about their estate planning? Of course not. Did you accept any gifts? Money? Promises of future compensation? No, never. Did you research my parents before your visits? Look up their property records, their business holdings, their net worth? Pamela's hands clenched in her lap. I Googled their names once to see if they had other family I should contact. That's all. Marcus pulled out his own tablet, began reading from it. Lance Gross, retired attorney and founding partner of Gross and Henderson. Estimated net worth between $12 and $15 million. Primary residence in Bellwood Hills, vacation home in Aspen, investment properties in 3 states. Mrs. Velma Gross, retired head librarian. Significant inherited wealth from her family's pharmaceutical business. He looked up. You expect us to believe you weren't aware of this? That money played no role in your sudden devotion? I didn't know any of that until just now, Pamela said, her voice shaking. I didn't care. They were people who needed help. People you had no professional obligation to help once they entered this hospital's care system. Morrison's tone was gentler than Marcus's, but no less firm. Miss Simons, I understand you meant well. But this hospital has boundaries in place for good reasons. Nurses cannot become personally involved with every patient who touches their heart. That path leads to burnout at best, exploitation at worst. I wasn't exploiting anyone. Then explain this. Marcus slid a photograph across the table. It showed Pamela asleep in the chair beside Velma's bed, her head resting on the mattress, her hand still holding Velma's. This was taken by a night nurse 3 days ago, at 2 in the morning. You were supposed to have left at 8 p.m. Pamela stared at the photo, seeing herself through their eyes, not a dedicated nurse, but a woman who'd lost all perspective, who'd crossed every line. Howard Chun, the legal representative, finally spoke. Ms. Simons, Mr. Gross has indicated that if this matter isn't resolved to his satisfaction, he intends to file formal complaints with the state nursing board and potentially pursue civil action against both you and the hospital for negligence in supervision. He paused. The hospital is prepared to offer you a choice. You can resign voluntarily, with a neutral reference, and this matter ends here. Or we can proceed with a formal termination and investigation, which would become part of your permanent record. The words hit like a physical blow. Resign or be fired. Give up her career voluntarily or have it taken from her. 12 years of dedication, of late nights and missed holidays, of saving lives and holding hands, and being the kind of nurse she'd always wanted to be, all of it ending in this sterile room, because she'd made the mistake of caring too much. I need time to think, Pamela whispered. You have until. Morrison's phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the tension. He frowned, looked at the screen. I apologize, but I need to take this. It's the ICU. He answered, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to alarm. What? When? Is she? Yes, I understand. We'll be right there. He ended the call, looking at Pamela with an unreadable expression. There's been an incident with Mrs. Gross. She's having a severe panic attack. Multiple staff members have tried to calm her, but she's pulling at her 4 lines, hyperventilating. She's asking for you. Marcus stood abruptly. Then sedate her. That's what medication is for. They're trying to avoid that if possible. Sedation could interfere with her memory recovery. Morrison looked at Pamela. Dr. Chun is requesting your presence. She believes you might be able to calm Mrs. Gross without pharmaceutical intervention. Absolutely not, Marcus said. This is exactly the kind of manipulation I'm talking about. My mother has been conditioned to depend on this woman, and now we're supposed to reward that behavior by. Your mother is in distress, Morrison interrupted. And right now, my priority is her medical well-being, not your legal theories. He turned to Pamela. I'm not ordering you to go, but if you're willing, it might prevent Mrs. Gross from injuring herself or requiring sedation that could set back her recovery. Pamela looked around the table at Patricia's conflicted expression, at Howard Chin's calculated neutrality, at Marcus's barely contained fury. She thought about walking away, about protecting what little was left of her career and reputation. Then she thought about Velma, frightened and confused, crying out for the one person her damaged brain remembered as safe. I'll go, she said quietly. Marcus moved to block her path. If you go up there, If you continue this charade, I will make it my personal mission to destroy you. I will file complaints in every jurisdiction. I will sue you for everything you have and everything you'll ever earn. Do you understand me? Pamela met his eyes, saw the fury there, the absolute conviction that she was a threat to be eliminated. She wondered what it must be like to be so certain, to see the world in such stark terms of predator and prey, to look at an exhausted nurse and see only a con artist. I understand, she said, but your mother needs help, and I'm not going to let your paranoia stop me from providing it. She walked past him, out of the conference room, toward the elevator. Morrison and Patricia followed, along with Marcus, who was already on his phone, presumably calling his law firm. The ride to the 4th floor felt eternal. Pamela could hear the commotion before the elevator doors even opened. Velma's voice, high and desperate, the calm urgings of nurses trying to soothe her, the electronic warnings of monitors registering dangerous vital signs. She walked into room 412 and found chaos. 2 nurses were trying to keep Velma from pulling out her foreline. A doctor was preparing a syringe of sedative, and Lance sat helplessly in his wheelchair, tears streaming down his face as he watched his wife spiral into panic. Velma, Pamela said quietly. The room went still. Velma's wild eyes found Pamela's face, and something in her expression shifted from terror to desperate relief. Pam, they said you weren't coming back. They said you left me. Pamela moved to the bedside, gently taking Velma's trembling hands in hers. I'm here now. I'm right here. You're safe. Promise? Velma's voice was a child's voice, small and frightened. Promise you won't leave again? Pamela looked at Marcus standing in the doorway, his phone raised, recording everything. She looked at Morrison, at Patricia, at all the people who held her future in their hands. Then she looked back at Velma and made a promise she had no idea if she could keep. I promise. Velma's breathing had finally slowed to normal, her grip on Pamela's hand loosening from desperate to merely anchored. The medical team had dispersed, the crisis averted without sedation, leaving only the core players in the quiet aftermath. Pamela at Velma's bedside, Lance in his wheelchair, Marcus standing rigid near the door, and Dr. Morrison observing from the corner with his arms crossed. This proves nothing, Marcus said, though his voice had lost some of its prosecutorial edge. Except that my mother has been psychologically manipulated into dependence. Marcus. Lance's voice cut through the room, quiet but commanding in a way Pamela hadn't heard before. It was the voice of a man who'd spent 40 years arguing cases in courtrooms, who knew how to make people listen. Sit down. Please. Dad. I'm trying to protect. I know what you're trying to do, and I love you for it. But you're wrong. Lance wheeled himself closer to his son. Sit down, and let me tell you what actually happened. All of it. Something in Lance's tone made Marcus comply, pulling a chair close but maintaining his defensive posture, arms crossed, jaw tight. Lance took a long breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. The accident was my fault. The words hung in the air. Pamela felt Velma's hand tighten in hers. What? Marcus leaned forward. Dad, no. The police report, said the other driver. The police report said what I told them to say. Lance's eyes were distant, looking at something beyond the hospital room. We were arguing. Your mother and I. About you, actually. About how you never visit, never call unless it's about business. About how we barely see our own son anymore. His voice cracked. She was crying. I was angry, defensive. I took my eyes off the road for just a second, maybe 2. When I looked back, we drifted into the other lane. The truck tried to swerve. I overcorrected. And then we were rolling. Velma made a small sound, and for the first time since waking, something flickered in her eyes, not full memory, but recognition of an emotional truth. I could hear metal tearing. Lance continued, his voice hollow with the memory. Glass breaking. Your mother screaming. And then we were upside down, and everything was quiet except for the hissing of the engine and the sound of her breathing. Shallow. Wrong. He looked at Marcus. I knew I was hurt. I could feel blood running down my face, pain in my ribs. But all I could think about was that I'd killed her. That my anger, my carelessness, my stupid pride had killed the woman I'd loved for 42 years. Marcus's expression had shifted from hostility to something more complex: concern, confusion, the beginning of understanding. I couldn't move much, Lance said. My seatbelt was jammed, but I could turn my head enough to see her. She wasn't conscious. Wasn't responding when I said her name. And I thought his voice broke completely. I thought those were going to be my last moments. Hanging upside down in a destroyed car, watching my wife die because of my mistakes, completely helpless to do anything about it. Pamela found herself holding her breath, though she'd lived through these moments herself from a different angle. Then I heard a voice. A woman's voice, calling out, asking if anyone could hear her. And I tried to yell, but I couldn't get enough air. So I waited, praying someone would find us before it was too late. Lance looked at Pamela now, his eyes wet. Then there was a face at the window. Her face. This stranger with kind eyes who said, "I'm a nurse." "I've got you." Dad, Marcus started, but Lance held up a hand. "Let me finish. Please." He turned back to his son. "I told her to save your mother first. And do you know what she said? She said, 'I've got you both. Not I'll do what I can. Not I'll try.' She promised me she had us both." And then she had to stop, compose himself. She squeezed herself into that wreckage. I don't know how. The car was crumpled, barely any space, glass everywhere. But she got in far enough to check your mother's pulse, to stabilize her neck, to make sure she was still breathing. Pamela had forgotten most of those details herself, the way trauma sometimes mercifully blurred the worst moments. But hearing Lance describe it brought them back the smell of gasoline, the terror that the car might catch fire, the impossibly tight space she'd forced herself into because Velma's airway needed to be checked. The paramedics arrived maybe 10 minutes later, Lance continued. Could have been 5, could have been 20. Time felt broken. But Pamela stayed with us the entire time. She held pressure on my head wound with one hand and kept checking your mother's breathing with the other. She talked to us. To me, because I was conscious. To your mother, even though she couldn't hear. She told us we were going to be okay. She told us help was coming. She promised she wouldn't leave us. Marcus was quiet now, his lawyer's mask beginning to crack. When the paramedics took over, I watched her step back. She was covered in our blood. Her hands were shaking. She looked exhausted, traumatized. And I thought that would be the last I'd see of her. That she'd go home, process what she'd been through, and move on with her life. Because that's what people do, right? They help in a crisis, and then they leave. They don't stick around for the aftermath. Lance wheeled closer to where Pamela sat. But she did. She showed up the next day. Not because anyone asked her to. Not because it was her job. She came because she wanted to know if we were okay. And then she came back the day after that. And the day after that. Because she wanted something, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its conviction. No. Lance's voice was firm. Because she cared. Because when your mother woke up confused and terrified, unable to recognize her own husband, Pamela was the one familiar voice in a world that had become alien. She didn't create that dependence, Marcus. She responded to it. There's a difference. Dr. Morrison cleared his throat. Mr. Gross, what you're describing is extraordinary, Lance interrupted. That's what it is. Extraordinary compassion from someone who had absolutely no obligation to give it. He looked at his son. Do you know what Pamela did 3 days ago? She brought flowers. Not expensive ones, just grocery store daisies. She put them on your mother's bedside table and said they reminded her of the library where your mother worked. She'd researched it, found old photos online, found out your mother used to keep fresh flowers at the circulation desk. Velma made a sound, her free hand moving to her head as if trying to grasp at a memory just out of reach. She brought music, Lance continued. Old songs from the 60s and 70s, because she'd heard me mention that's when we started dating. She brought books to read aloud. She learned that your mother likes mysteries, likes stories with happy endings. She learned these things because she paid attention, because she cared enough to see your mother as a person, not just a patient. Dad, I understand she was helpful, but that doesn't change the fact that she crossed professional boundaries. Professional boundaries, Lance repeated, his voice hardening. Let me tell you about boundaries, Marcus. I called you the night of the accident. Left you a voicemail. Did you know that? Marcus went pale. My phone was off. I was in depositions all day, and then I called you the next day. And the day after that. Left messages telling you your mother was in a coma, that I was hurt, that I needed you. Do you know when you finally called back? The silence was crushing. For days later, Lance said quietly. For days. You were busy. I understand that. Important case, big client, your career. But for 4 days, while your mother was unconscious and your father was trying to hold it together, Pamela was the one who sat with us. She was the one who called my lawyer for me when I couldn't figure out the hospital phone. She was the one who made sure the nurses knew about your mother's medication allergies. She did the things that family is supposed to do. That's not fair, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I came as soon as I could. I know you did. And I'm not saying you don't love us. I know you do. But Pamela loved us when we needed it most, and she's a complete stranger. Lance reached out, took his son's hand. She didn't do it for money. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because when I asked her to save your mother first, she heard what I was really saying, that love matters more than anything else in this world. And she honored that. Marcus's face crumpled, tears finally breaking through the attorney's armor. I thought I was so sure she was. I know what you thought. And in your world, maybe that kind of suspicion makes sense. Maybe you've seen too many people who take advantage, who prey on the vulnerable. But son, sometimes people are exactly what they appear to be. Sometimes there are nurses who stop at accident scenes even when they're exhausted. Sometimes there are women who sit with strangers in hospitals because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes mercy is real. Pamela felt her own tears falling now, unable to hold them back. She'd spent 2 weeks being practical, being professional, telling herself she was just doing what any nurse would do. But hearing Lance put words to it, hearing him see her not as a liability or a threat, but as someone who'd simply tried to love his wife back to life, it broke something open inside her chest. Marcus stood abruptly, walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. When he turned back around, his face was wet, his expensive suit rumpled, all his corporate polish stripped away, leaving just a son who'd almost made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry, he said to Pamela, the words raw and difficult. I'm so sorry. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually there. I was going to destroy you. I was going to. He couldn't finish. Instead, he crossed to where she sat and did something completely unexpected. He dropped to his knees beside her chair and put his head in his hands. You saved them, he whispered. You saved my parents, and I tried to punish you for it. What kind of person does that make me? Pamela reached out tentatively, put a hand on his shoulder. It makes you someone who loves his parents and wanted to protect them. That's not evil. It's just human. Misguided human, Marcus said with a broken laugh. Paranoid human. Human who needs to learn the difference between threat and gift. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Gross, given this new information, am I to understand you're withdrawing your complaint? Marcus looked up, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand in a gesture so vulnerable it made him look decades younger. I'm not just withdrawing it. Is there a way to commend her? To make this right? That won't be necessary, Pamela said quickly. Yes, it will, Lance said firmly. Marcus, you wanted to know if Pamela helped herself to anything? She did. She helped herself to nothing. No gifts, no money, no promises. But what she gave us. He looked at his wife, who was watching all of this with tears running down her face, her hand still holding Pamela's. She gave us hope. She gave us compassion. She gave us someone to trust when we couldn't even trust our own memories. Velma spoke for the first time since the crisis had passed, her voice small but clear. I don't remember much, but I remember her voice in the dark, telling me I was safe, that someone was taking care of me. She looked at Pamela. You were the first face I saw when I woke up, the first person who made sense. And even though I don't remember my own life yet, I remember that you matter. You matter to me. The words settled over the room like a benediction. Dr. Morrison smiled. Patricia wiped her eyes, and even Howard Chun from legal looked like he might be suppressing emotion. Marcus stood, straightened his suit, tried to recover some dignity. Miss Simons, I'd like to make this right. My firm handles medical advocacy cases. If you ever need legal support, representation, anything, I just need you to let me keep being a nurse, Pamela said quietly. That's all I've ever wanted. Dr. Morrison nodded. I think we can arrange that. Miss Simons, consider this matter closed. No disciplinary action, no notation in your file. In fact, he paused, exchanged a glance with Patricia. We've been looking for someone to help develop our patient advocacy program. Someone who understands the human side of medicine, not just the protocol. Would you be interested in a position that would allow you to bridge the gap between clinical care and patient support? Pamela stared at him, unable to process the sudden reversal. Yes. Yes, I would. Good. We'll discuss details later. But for now, Morrison gestured to Velma. I think your patient needs you. The room gradually emptied, Morrison and Patricia leaving to handle paperwork, Howard Chun making notes on his tablet, Dr. Chin stopping by to check Velma's vitals. Marcus lingered, watching his mother with something like wonder as she dozed peacefully, still holding Pamela's hand. "She looks so fragile," he said quietly. "I forget sometimes. I see her as this force of nature. This woman who raised me and built a career and never took crap from anyone. But she's just human. Vulnerable. Like the rest of us. That's what this place teaches you," Pamela said. "We're all just people. Just fragile humans trying to take care of each other." Marcus turned to her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said about making this right. About the legal support, but also my parents are going to need care. Real care, during their recovery and after. I want to hire you." "Marcus, I can't accept payment. Not as a private nurse. As a friend. As family." He swallowed hard. "I've been absent. I've been so focused on my career, on winning cases and making partner and proving myself, that I forgot what actually matters. You didn't forget. You stopped on a highway, and you didn't forget. So please, let me learn from you. Let me figure out how to be the kind of son who deserves parents like mine." Lance had been quiet, listening. Now he spoke. He's not usually this humble. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Everyone laughed, the sound breaking the remaining tension like sunlight through clouds. Over the next hour, they talked about care plans and recovery timelines and what Velma would need as her memories slowly returned. Marcus made calls, rearranged his schedule, committed to staying in town for at least 2 weeks. Lance dozed off, exhausted by the emotional ordeal but peaceful. And Pamela sat beside Velma, watching her sleep, feeling something she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Not burnout, not exhaustion, not the hollow sense of being a cog in an uncaring machine. Purpose, connection, the reason she'd become a nurse in the first place. When Velma's eyes fluttered open, they focused immediately on Pamela's face. "Still here," she murmured. "Still here," Pamela confirmed. "Good," Velma said. And then, like a miracle, like a door opening in her damaged memory, she added, "I remember flowers. A desk. Books. Did I work with books?" "You were a librarian," Pamela said, her heart soaring. "You loved it. You kept fresh flowers on the circulation desk." Velma smiled, the expression brightening her whole face. "Daisies. I like daisies." "Yes," Pamela whispered. "You did. It was just a fragment, just one small memory returning from the dark. But it was enough. It was a beginning." Marcus watched from the doorway, tears streaming down his face again, seeing what Pamela had seen all along: not a transaction, not a liability, not a threat. Just love. Simple, extraordinary, healing love. The kind that stops on highways. The kind that sits in hospitals long past visiting hours. The kind that promises to save someone first and actually means it. The kind that changes everything. The garden party was Velma's idea, though she insisted she couldn't remember whose garden they were actually in. Her memory had returned in pieces over 6 months, some days bringing floods of recognition, others just gentle trickles. But she knew she loved gardens, knew she loved gathering people she cared about, and knew that the woman arranging flowers by the refreshment table was someone who mattered deeply. "Pam," Velma called out, waving. "Come sit with me. You're not staff today, you're family." Pamela set down the daisies, always daisies now, and joined Velma on the bench beneath the oak tree. The older woman's hair had grown back where they'd shaved it for surgery, silver streaks mixing with the gray in a way that caught the afternoon light beautifully. "I still can't believe you're leaving the hospital," Velma said, patting Pamela's hand. "Though I suppose I understand. They're lucky to have you at the foundation." The Gross Family Foundation for Patient Advocacy had been Marcus's idea, funded by his parents, but shaped by Pamela's vision. A program to train medical professionals in the kind of care that went beyond protocol, that saw patients as people, that understood sometimes the best medicine was simply presence. "I'm not leaving nursing," Pamela corrected gently. "Just expanding what it means." Lance approached with 2 glasses of lemonade, his gait steady now, the cane he'd needed for months finally retired to a closet. "Marcus is giving another speech," he said with fond exasperation. "Something about paradigm shifts in healthcare. I think he's been reading too many TED Talks." They could hear Marcus's voice carrying across the garden, animated and passionate as he talked to a group of medical students about the day he almost destroyed the person who'd saved his parents. He told the story often now, used it in his healthcare advocacy work, never shying away from his own mistakes. "He's a good man," Velma said. "Took him a while to figure out what that meant, but he got there." We all got there, Lance said, settling beside his wife. Some of us just needed a nurse to show us the way. Patricia appeared, off-duty and relaxed in sundress instead of scrubs. There's cake, she announced. And Simons, the hospital administrator, wants to talk to you about that training program. I think he's finally ready to actually fund it properly. Pamela smiled, watching the garden fill with people, nurses and doctors, patients and families, people whose lives had intersected in that strange alchemy of crisis and care. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, driving home exhausted, ready to give up on everything she'd once believed about her profession. She thought about a smoking car on Highway 9, a dying man's whisper, a promise made in broken glass. Save her first. She had. But in doing so, she'd saved something else too, her faith that mercy mattered, that connection healed, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply stop when everyone else drove past. Come on, Velma said, standing and offering her hand. Let's go get some cake before Marcus eats it all. And Pam. She paused, her eyes clear and present and full of the memories that had finally, blessedly returned. Thank you. For everything. For staying when you could have left. For loving us when we couldn't even remember who we were. Pamela took her hand, let herself be pulled into the celebration, into the life she'd almost lost trying to save. Always, she said simply. I'll always stay. And she meant it. To all my amazing viewers, thank you. Every time you watch, like, and share my videos, you keep the echoes of love alive. Your support, your comments, and your time mean more than you know. This channel exists because of you. I appreciate you deeply.